Welcome to the Dyslexia is Our Superpower podcast with Gibby Booth Jasper, where we hear from fellow dyslexians looking at the positives dyslexia has to offer and the many ways to succeed as a person with dyslexia.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is Gibby Booth Jasper, and today I am talking with Paul Rabil, who is a professional lacrosse player and entrepreneur. Welcome, Paul.
Gibby, thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you taking the time. So let's jump in right away and kind of talk to me about your childhood. Did you know from an early age that you had dyslexia? Were you diagnosed later? How did that look like for you?
So I was not diagnosed until I was in early middle school. And what I have specifically is auditory processing disorder. I'm challenged with word retrieval and I have ADHD. Learning differences run through our family. My brother has different forms of ADHD, ADD, goes to my dad, and then down to my younger sister, who struggles with more severe dyslexia. So it's part of how we, I think, collectively learned and maneuvered within the household.
Gotcha. And are your parents dyslexic or stuff come from them, or is it sort of not?
So not that we're aware of,
okay.
But I think that, first of all, we know about any type of learning differences, in particular dyslexia, it's not a, kind of contradictory to what many people think or maybe presume when it comes to learning differences. Is not a detriment to your IQ or emotional intelligence, and at least to the way that people build their professional and personal lives from a career standpoint. It might be from the perspective of the traditional educational system. But anyway, the screening of learning differences, dyslexia, it wasn't as prevalent when my folks were growing up as it is today.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So specifically for you, talk to me about what are some of the advantages that dyslexia gives you, and what are some of the things that you find more challenging because of it?
Well, I would say that it's, by and large, the most part, it can be framed as a gift. Things in traditional education, educational pipeline and the way that we're taught to study for exams and produce work product from papers based on classes that we're taking is probably more, lives in this really archaic mindset, and it doesn't necessarily jive well with someone who's challenged on the learning difference front. So I think the necessity to think creatively, work really hard, be thoughtful, build relationships, create certain mnemonic devices to retain while also, I think exploring alternate methods of learning really benefits children or people with learning differences in the long run. So when I frame it as like a gift, it's like, yes, there are certain short-term challenges. And I think the biggest ones are primarily soft skill challenges and bullying and more like social peer pressure and such, per the norm of taking a class and excelling in a class. But the long-term value is certainly one that is worth betting on and has been proven out by a number of successful people across entrepreneurship and other industries.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so for you personally, has it helped you in ways of playing lacrosse, being an entrepreneur? What about any specifics there?
Sure. So I would say that developing really intense work habits were a product of the way that I learned in the classroom. I had to oftentimes read and then reread and read 3 times over to retain any form of content necessary to kind of educate myself and pass a class. That transferred over to the field. I would notice that I would just, and a lot of this has been in reflection, but I would practice shot after shot after shot, and do so and using similar mechanics that I would in the classroom due to my learning differences. So it turned out that I had stronger work ethic than most of my peers on the athletic field, and I don't think that it was coincident. I think that a lot of it stemmed from the way that I was forced to learn due to my learning difference.
Gotcha. And what about school? Was school particularly, you said that you had to read things over and over again. I can totally relate to that. Was school particularly tough for you?
Yeah, I think it was. I think that school is tough for a lot of people. And we're talking about young kids trying to excel and across certain cases and material that may not be of interest. And then in other cases, I would excel in coursework that was of interest. So, I think that's probably consistent for younger kids, no matter if they are, if they have learning differences or not. But for me, I had and tapped into a lot of the resources that were offered to me due to my learning differences. So I had extra time on tests. I had access to tutors. I had note takers in classes. And so I really leveraged that to my benefit and was pretty critical around the way that I was thinking and learning and making sure that I was always progressing.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's really interesting because very often getting accommodations can be seen as sort of a negative, like, oh, I have, that I had to get these and that maybe other people will notice and say things. So I really love that you took advantage of it. And I'm assuming did you face any sort of problems with it, or was it just sort of like you just realized it was going to help you and so you just took advantage?
Well, I think you're right. There are stereotypes associated, and certain insecurities arise from feeling like you are, getting assistance for areas of which you otherwise are deficient or would be considered deficient in. But I think the more that you tap into those accommodations and those resources, the benefits come fast, and you have to put equal work into yourself personally, your personal growth and your own self-awareness and kind of your stake in the game amongst your peers, so you can take advantage of those accommodations and feel comfortable doing so. But I would certainly say that it's challenging. But once I kind of got over that hump, I felt like I was really empowered by them.
I love that. So what about specifically, was it reading and writing that presented the most challenges? Was it math? Was it all of the above?
It was more reading and writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that it would be a combination of retention of material that I was reading. And then with writing, I would just often would feel like, my kind of brain to hand coordination would skip over things. So I would, would write incomplete or fragmented sentences, and I would notice that in the rewind of the editing process. But that I'm sure is a common theme for people who lack any type of experience writing. And that's part of the way I reflect on my tenure in school is as a student is you're at this fundamental level of learning. So there's certainly different processes that benefit those with learning differences to retain information and improve in a way that's custom for them. But at the same time too, you can almost compound negativity and often just blame the learning difference or an inability to comprehend material. While I think it's important to remind yourself that, like, hey, this is all new material, and many things in life are worth repeating or reading several times over to retain, that's like the core process of comprehension.
Great. So can you tell me what you're doing at the moment? You have a podcast yourself. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I'm fascinated by other people and their learning techniques and how they reach a level of high performance and success, which is both uniquely defined by an individual or in some cases the space that they're in. What we ultimately get down to, so I sit down and interview people, what we ultimately get down to is their own core self-analysis, their own comfortability in their skin, the relationships that they value, how they communicate, what their work products like, certain tips into being tactical around performance, whether that be an athlete or an entrepreneur. And so it's just as valuable for me as the interviewer picking up certain utilities as I hope it is for the listeners. But beneath all of it is kind of relationship building and working on kind of connection with other people.
I love that. And it's called what? Remind me.
So it's called Suiting Up with Paul Rabil. So it's a little bit of a play on suiting up in the equipment or in the board with your equipment and on the athletic field, or a suit in the boardroom. So we kind of cross over between sports, athletics, and business, and personal and professional.
And apart from, it sounds wonderful. Apart from the podcast, what else have you got going on?
So I'm pretty active across media. I have a YouTube channel that I've been creating content against for the past 3 years or so. And I have a team internally that we like to tell stories, and that is through the lens of lacrosse players and sports, as well as, capturing content from the podcast that I mentioned to general lifestyle and other interests that I'm involved in. So we put out weekly shows. We've done a daily vlog, and that's like a core component of our media strategy, would be video and audio. Off the field, I have an event business and an online instructional company. So I have a business partner that helps me in both areas there, kind of think through core strategies, business partnerships, customer acquisition and such. So I'm genuinely interested and find a lot of happiness working as an entrepreneur and as a creator across media. But against that is my performance. So I play professional lacrosse here in New York and with Team USA, and each day designate the appropriate resources and bandwidth to my training, nutrition, recovery, physical therapy, all that type of stuff. So I definitely live a pretty full life as far as my dedication to my career right now. And I'm pretty deep and focused in that area, but it's been a lot. It's been a lot and a ton of excitement, as lacrosse is still very much in its nascent stages.
Excellent. So going back to dyslexia, I'm curious, when you either first started playing lacrosse professionally, was dyslexia something that you were very open about? Was it something that you were much more closed about? How did that look like?
So I'm pretty, I think I've been open about learning differences and leveraging the platform of sports to tell that story since I turned professional. I started foundation in 2011. I conceptualized it in 2010. But prior to that, we have to remember that athletes are oftentimes starting in their early 20s. So they're very much trying to figure himself out, and the work ethic, the aspirational goals, the identity, the relationships as an early 20-year-old. So my parents did a good job at an early age instilling the humility and charitable conscientiousness that often drives a lot of self-worth, but communal growth into me. And so I participated in my early 20s with different charities and gave back to the community. And then when I reached a level of success, I felt it was meaningful at the pro level. It was right around when I was 25 or 26, and it was backed by a couple of championships and an MVP. I decided that I felt like I had a big enough platform to create something that was more bespoke to my family, and that's why we built the Paul Rabil Foundation. So I think overall, like, one of the most powerful ways to destigmatize anything, in this case, learning differences, is to talk about it and share your story. So I've never been afraid of that, and have been fortunate enough to be equipped with a platform and a voice and an audience to play a small role in doing such.
Excellent. I think that's so wonderful. Talk to me more about the foundation.
So we started the foundation to work with schools that focus on educating children with learning differences. As we know, one of the biggest challenges in the U.S., at least with the public school systems, is identifying specific types of learning differences, whether it's a kid who has ADHD, if it's one who has dyslexia, if someone who has auditory processing disorder, if someone has autism. By and large, the most part, now certain states are looking to amend that and have done so in many cases. But in Maryland, where I grew up, and many states along the East Coast, a child with any number of learning differences gets lumped into the same classroom. So it's not a great learning environment. And, there are certain economic challenges associated with the public school system and the pipeline that they have, and the access to teachers and resources. So I'm not criticizing that, but what we wanted to do is look at the private schools that specialize in educating children with learning differences in a way that's unique to the child, and help them through the avenue of economic resources. So we created a scholarship fund to try and eliminate or mitigate that cost that a family has to incur to seek out that type of education. And then what we also did was started lacrosse programs at our partnered schools that we sought out, that were A, interested, and B, willing and able to commit to the level that we were. We would donate hard goods and soft goods, so equipment and jerseys, and work with their local work with the local teachers at the school, because coaching is critical to personal development and athletic development at that level. But we felt like, from my experience, having access to sports really helped me from a confidence level, and so we wanted to provide that same opportunity through our foundation.
I love that. Talk to me a little bit how you got into lacrosse.
So it's an interesting story. My neighbor gave me his backup stick, and when I was 12 years old, I previously was playing basketball. I swam, and I ran track and field. So I always looked at sports as an outlet for me, and I tended to have genetically some pretty good talents athletically, both size and speed. So as a young boy growing up, I would after school, I would just go out and play in the field. So my dad had always told us that if there was a sport that we wanted to play and he could afford it, he would get us in it. And lacrosse happened to be one of those when I was 12. And it was just by virtue of a relationship that I had with my neighbor.
And was it something that sort of like love at first sight? You just totally were addicted, or?
So it actually wasn't. It was probably my second or third favorite sport. And I was very much, again, like those humble beginnings that my dad and mom instilled in me. I was never thinking, hey, I want to play professional sports, or hey, I want to even play college sports. I just really enjoyed playing. And I actually looked at, I couldn't comprehend being the best at something in the country, or good enough to, and I don't know, I don't think it was a lack of confidence. I just think we weren't thinking at that scope. We just wanted to improve and have fun and play with friends. So I played rec lacrosse, rec basketball, rec soccer, and would very much enjoy the sport that season I was in. And at the end of the spring, I would hang up my lacrosse stick and I would swim. At the end of the summer, I would hang up my swim cap and goggles, and I would play soccer, and then I would play basketball in the winter. So it wasn't until I was in high school where I really started to excel as an athlete, and then specifically a lacrosse player. And that came through, I think, some of the hand-eye coordination gifts that I have genetically. And then I took a genuine interest in the sport as I was maturing then.
Gotcha. I love that. I love that it wasn't an instant thing and that it occurred later. This is a question I like to ask everybody because everybody's answer is so different. I'm wondering what your advice is for two groups of people. and you can answer it in whichever order you prefer. But the two groups I'm interested in are, one, the dyslexic, either teenager or kid who's struggling with their dyslexia, and then the other group is the parent watching their child struggle. What would be your advice for those two groups of people?
So I think this is kind of age and relationship agnostic, but communicate. And I think that, whether you're the parent or the son or daughter, is kind of encourage you to share how you're feeling and talk about the challenges and ask for help. I think we live in a world where asking for help is considered a weakness because it infers that we don't have the answer. But it's also the fastest way to learn. And it's also a great way to more deeply connect with someone, because it shows your level of care and admiration and vulnerability to build on that relationship. So I'm a big advocate of communication, transparency, asking for help, honesty, full disclosure. And like kind of underpinned in all that is ensuring that, and my guess is, given that you're talking about parent, daughter, son relationship, is that it's embedded in a level of trust and hopefully a secure, attached relationship to where they can feel comfortable in doing that. I get that with some friends, especially new and in other maybe toxic relationships, there's more of an inherent risk in sharing those vulnerabilities. But if you're a parent, set aside time specifically to talk with your kids and how they're feeling, and not just like the arithmetic or the tactics of learning, but ask them how they're doing personally, with friends, with girlfriends or boyfriends, and then vice versa. I think most of us go through life mind mapping and being ill communicative, and we find that there's a lot of relief when you're honest, especially with someone you care about, and you get a really great result.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's wonderful advice. So for someone listening and interested either in the scholarships that you guys offer through the foundation or anything else that you guys are offering, do they reach out through the website? Is that the way to reach out for information?
Yeah. So we have a contact and a donate page on our website. It's paulrabilfoundation.org. That's Paul, RABIL, foundation.org. And we have a lot of great initiatives that we're currently pushing out. One is at the lacrosse Final Four this May over Memorial Day weekend in Boston. I'll be co-hosting an event with Bill Belichick, who's the head coach of the New England Patriots, and his foundation, the Bill Belichick Foundation. And we have an annual gala every December where all of our proceeds go to our school partners. And then we're constantly just generating and creating new initiatives and having good conversation with those in the learning difference community on ways that we can advance understanding around LD, but also ways to participate.
Wonderful. And are these helping schools all over the country, or more in Maryland and New York where you are now, or where's the location for this?
So primarily in Maryland, DC, Virginia, New York, and Boston. We are certainly open and take inbound requests from other schools across the country. We're just, doing the best we can to grow as a small unit, but to do so carefully, mindfully, and with our partners, but certainly not an exclusive organization. We do, kind of charitable golf events and other things of that nature on behalf of other groups too. But to be really specific on the school partners right now, it's a bit of a process that we go through to make sure that we align both from an operational standpoint, but also from like a governance of donating scholarships and grants and all of the kind of rules and regulations you have to get through. So it can be a tedious process, but we have really great relationships with the schools that we work with and the programs that we work with, and we're always open to growing.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to the Dyslexia is Our Superpower podcast, and we'd love to hear from you with comments and questions, so please feel free to get in touch. You can email us at dyslexiaisoursuperpower@gmail.com. That's dyslexiaisoursuperpower, all one word, @gmail.com. And don't forget to spread the word by sharing us on social media.